Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today. Um, Welcome to the New York State Network for Youth Successes Power 3 Advocacy webinar series. My name is Gabby Schwartz. I'm the policy coordinator here at the New York State Network for Youth Success. So I want to thank you all first for coming to join us today for our webinar on the state of after school in New York. I do want to let everyone know, as you probably got the notification when you entered, that we will be recording this session today. I'd also like to know a little bit more about who we have joining us today. So if you could take a quick moment just to introduce yourself in the chat, who you are, where you're from, just give us a quick introduction so I know who we're here with. Allie is going to be our moderator. She's put that question in the chat for you. So if you have any kind of technical questions, individual questions, then please let her know. Also, if throughout the session you find yourself having questions, if we have some time, we will talk about those at the end. So feel free to drop those in the chat and Allie can moderate for those. And also, I want to let everyone know that this training today does not count toward OCFS credit. So if you're here for OCFS credit, unfortunately, that is not what this webinar is for. So want to be upfront with you all about that. So today we're going to explore the current state of after school before we enter the state budget season. So New York's budget season runs from January until April, with the final budget due on April 1st. And before the budget season starts, it's really important for advocates to level set on where our issues currently stand, which is the goal of the session today. We're going to be reviewing and discussing how we expect the most recent election to impact the after-school system, the changes in the after-school landscape as a result of last year's budget, and the introduction of the Learning and Enrichment After-School Program Supports, or LEAPS grant, what the New York State Network for Youth Success is asking for from the state in the fiscal year 2025-26 to support after-school at the state level, and then how you can be involved in after-school advocacy at the state level as well. So before we begin, I'm going to take a quick minute to introduce who we are, what we do, and what the Power 3 campaign is. So the Network for Youth Success is the statewide after-school network in New York, working with 49 other after-school networks and the National After-School Alliance. We're committed to strengthening the capacity and commitment of communities, programs, and professionals to increase access to high-quality programs and services beyond the traditional classroom. We're also the state affiliate for the National After-School Association. We're the New York State lead for the National Girls Collaborative Project, and we are also the backbone agency for the New York State Community Schools Network. This webinar series is part of our Power 3 campaign, which is a public awareness campaign on the role, benefits, and impact of after school. The goal of this webinar series is to really give you insight into the world of advocacy and to help empower you and give you knowledge in order to advocate on behalf of after-school, summer, and expanding learning programs and the families in your community. You can learn a little bit more about the Power 3 campaign on our webpage, which we're going to share in the chat box as well for you all. There it is. Allie's right on top of it. So we're going to start today by discussing what we expect to see as a result of the election in November at that state level and at the federal level. So we're going to review a little bit, kind of broad strokes about what we're thinking we might see. So first, starting with the state. All of New York's 150 state assembly and 63 Senate seats were up for re-election this year. Overall, there were very few changes to the status quo following the election results, with Democrats still holding control of the Assembly and the Senate. So there were seats that were open, but they often remained within the party with a few exceptions, so there really wasn't a huge status quo shift for New York. The largest difference that we saw is that New York no longer has a supermajority or a veto-proof majority in the legislature. So this means, a supermajority or a veto-proof majority means that the Democrats in New York no longer have a large enough majority to overturn a governor's veto. So while this is a change and this is a shift from previously, over the last few years, the Democrats have had a supermajority and they haven't used it. This is probably due to the fact that Governor Hochul is also a Democrat, so they're all in the same party and there isn't much of a need for them to override a veto in a lot of cases. Regardless of the legislature's makeup, we know that after school is a strongly bipartisan issue in New York. So as the state network, we found strong supporters on both sides of the aisle. Oftentimes what this looks like is there's some slight differences in the approach that they have or the motivation for supporting after-school programs, but it still stands that we have lawmakers on both sides that have it as a priority that are very connected with their after-school programs in their communities. So as we enter the new year, the legislature will work on finalizing leadership roles and committees. So one of the crucial committees that needs new leadership this year is the Assembly Ways and Means Committee, which is central to New York's budgeting and financial decision-making processes. With the retirement of long-term Assemblymember Weinstein, it's rumored that Assemblymember Pretlow will be tapped for this powerful committee. So if you're in his district, keep your eye out because he might have a lot of power coming up here pretty soon. The network's also going to be watching very closely for the legislators that lead committees on education and childcare. That's if any changes are made. We don't necessarily anticipate there being changes, but there obviously could be. It's a new session. Currently, as of previous years, in the state Senate, Senator Shelley Mayer is the chair of the Committee on Education, and Senator Jabari Brisport is the chair of the Committee on Children and Families. And in the Assembly, Assemblymember Andrew Hevesy is the current chair of the Committee on Children and Families, and Assemblymember Michael Benedetto is the chair on Education. All four of these legislators are folks that we've worked with historically in the past. They've been supportive of After School. They're people that we've connected with and have shown their support in various ways. So on that federal level, there were some more changes that we want to discuss than at that state level. As many of you are likely aware, control of the White House did change parties from Democrat to Republican, with former President Donald Trump winning against the current Vice President Kamala Harris. The Republicans also won both the House and the Senate with a small margin in both. This means that the Republican Party controls the legislative and executive branches of government right now for at least the next 2 years. Senator Suzanne Collins from Maine is expected to be the chair on the Senate Appropriations Committee. This means that Senator Collins will be key in making decisions around the Senate budget, including overall budget levels and what's prioritized in the Senate proposal. This is important because Senator Collins has a track record of being a strong supporter of after school, and she's also a strong supporter of childcare at the federal level as well. For example, earlier this year, Collins introduced legislation to increase working families' access to quality and affordable childcare through the Child Care and Development Block Grant Reauthorization Act of 2024, or CCDBG, if anyone else is more familiar with the acronym. We're hopeful that Collins' leadership is going to lead to more support for school-age children and youth in the state budget, the Senate budget, as well as just childcare and after school in general. We also expect that there's going to be changes as a result of a change in leadership and the presidency. So we want to be upfront with everyone. There's still a lot of unknowns. There's nothing concrete as of today. So we're really just talking through what we expect, what we've seen in the past, and what we've heard moving forward. So there are some policies that we expect will be part of Trump's second term that could impact after school based on his previous administration and his campaign promises. So during his first term, the Trump administration proposed the elimination and/or consolidation of the 21st Century Community Learning Centers program. And that was in all four of his executive budget proposals. The 21st Century program provides grants that support after-school and summer programs for students attending high-poverty, low-performing schools, and provides funding for academic enrichment activities, a range of enrichment activities designed to reinforce or complement regular academic programming, such as career and technical programs, counseling programs, art and music programs, and STEM learning. And it also supports literacy and educational development services. 21st Century currently supports approximately 70,000 students in New York and approximately 1.5 million nationally. While these proposals would cause a significant change in the landscape of after-school nationwide, the proposals were not adopted by Congress during Trump's previous presidency. So each time that these were proposed in the executive budget, they were rejected, and Congress increased funding to the program overall. So this means that continued relationship building with members of Congress and advocacy efforts will be really important to continue showing the benefits of 21st Century for young people, because Congress has shown that they are supportive of it. So we really want to make the case to them about how important 21st Century is, so that when they're proposing their budgets, we know that they're not looking to cut or consolidate 21st Century. Our national partners have created a fact sheet related to 21st Century that's really helpful for advocates to be able to quickly give some quick facts about 21st Century, what it looks like, how it works, so that representatives can understand the benefits. Allie just dropped that in the chat box, so you guys can all take a look at that. I recommend you save it for future advocacy or just your own knowledge if you're curious. So our national partners have also been keeping track of issues related to after school that the Trump campaigns discussed. So this can give us a little bit of insight into their priorities and some policies that they might pursue once Trump is sworn into the presidency next month. Trump's campaign focused on education as a major sticking point, and it's emphasized the importance of local and state control in education decisions. So this includes an interest in closing the Department of Education, which we expect to be a really complicated process, but it is something that they have discussed. The Trump campaign also focused on the importance of education that centers on career readiness and project-based learning opportunities. So this signals a system that will likely emphasize programs that offer hands-on learning opportunities as opposed to other types of learning opportunities. While there was a significant focus on the education system, Trump and his administration have shared very little related to childcare. So we're not quite as clear about what the plans for childcare look like. We expect that the Trump administration will focus on reauthorizing the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act passed during his first term. This program expanded the child care tax credit for families, but it also resulted in a decrease of overall federal tax revenue that could have significant impacts on social programs that support families. So we want to emphasize once more that there's still a lot of unknowns. We're not super clear on what exactly this will look like until Trump does take the presidency in January. So that and the 119th Congress, so really how they're going to interact and what they're going to do. If you want to know a little bit more about the federal movement, we really encourage you to read the After School Alliance's article on the topic. This is specifically related to after school and shares more details than I was able to do here. We also encourage you to sign up for our listserv, our Power of Three listserv. That's where we're going to share a lot of federal updates related to after school as they become available. So we track what the Alliance is posting. We share it there for you all so that you have quick access to it. And Allie dropped both of those in the chat for everyone as well. So moving gears, shifting gears. So as we move away from that election season, we really want to talk about how we want to build strategies for ensuring that after school is prioritized at that state level, because especially as we mentioned, there's been an emphasis on education at the state level from Trump's campaign. So we want to make sure that we're keeping mindful of what we can do at the state level. So to do that, we need to review the current state of after school in New York to understand its place and where we plan to go. So where are we right now? And then where can we go with that? So this slide here is a table. Don't worry, you do not have to screenshot it or anything. We're going to share the slides after. It breaks down the direct and indirect funding sources for after school in New York, including our most recent allocation amount, the approximate number of students served for the purpose of the funding source, and number of students served, purpose of the funding source, as you can see on the headings. We're gonna, again, share this PowerPoint. Please don't worry about trying to screenshot it. The Empire State After School and Advantage After School programs were the previous two main direct funding sources for programs supporting after school in New York State. Between these programs, New York invested $88 million directly into after school. So both programs served similar demographics and had similar requirements and targets. And in last year's budget, the state combined these two programs into one line item, increasing funding to approximately $100 million. This resulted in the new after-school program, the Learning and Enrichment After-School Program Supports, or LEAPS. So from here on, I'll probably be referring to it primarily as LEAPS, and that's how a lot of folks know it anyway. So funded at least $97.5 million and serving over 35,000, not 3,500, 35,000 children. LEAPS provides grants to nonprofits working in high-need school districts with at least 50% of the student population identified as economically disadvantaged, and it's managed by the Office of Children and Family Services. Most of the funding sources on these tables are New York State specific, with the exception of 21st Century, which we talked a little bit about earlier, which are federally funded and state managed. Many of these programs were flat funded last year, so that means they did not receive any additional funding, with the exception of the Summer Youth Employment Program, which received an increase of $10 million, and the 21st Century Program with an increase of $4.9 million approximately for New York. So these were not the only programs that were passed in the fiscal year 24-25 budget last year, or I guess earlier this year, but the last budget we did for the state. In addition to LEAPS funding, the state provided about $2.25 million for a pilot program to provide positive youth development opportunities and services to older adolescents during out-of-school time. The budget also directed support, anticipated to be about $1 million, for a technical assistance provider to support LEAPS grant recipients. So far, the Office of Children and Family Services has not released details on the technical assistance funding yet, so we aren't quite sure of the details on that. Finally, the fiscal year 24-25 budget included a significant step toward a universal access in New York, so universal after-school access in New York. The budget required that the Office of Children and Family Services complete a feasibility study for providing universal after-school programming in New York. This is an exploratory step that will help the state understand the necessary steps that they need to take and resources they need to invest to achieve universal access for after school. The study deadline was 18 months after the passage of it. So it passed in April, it's 18 months after April, which I'm not able to do the quick math in my head, but 18 months after April. These changes are really strong steps toward providing a more accessible, well-supported after-school system that simplifies processes for after-school programs. So we're excited to see a lot of these changes. So the introduction of LEAPs resulted in changes to the after-school system that are important that we understand as we continue our advocacy efforts. We want to level set on what changed and how it looks. So the LEAPs program was created to be a completely new program that was not required to fund the same after-school providers as Advantage and Empire did. As a new program, LEAPs brought new funding to communities that were not previously receiving funding for after-school, but also disrupting after-school for programs that didn't receive LEAPs but were previously funded by Advantage and Empire. These changes offered free services to families that have not received state-funded after-school programs, but as we mentioned, disrupted services for other families that previously did rely on these longstanding relationships with the longstanding programs that had relationships with their communities. Numbers-wise, LEAPs received over 400 applications, with awards made to about 128 programs representing 238 programs, 128 programs representing 238 program sites. Those are close numbers, guys. We will put a full list of the LEAPs grants that were released by OCFS it was in October, so a few months ago. This is a full list of the folks that received LEAPs grants in case anyone hasn't seen it. So another notable feature of LEAPs is that only youth up to age 12 are eligible for the LEAPs programs. This created a gap in services for middle and high school students that was not present before the introduction of LEAPs. We know that after school is important for the development of middle and high school age young people, as it provides a safe space to explore their interests and build relationships with caring adults. Further, LEAPs provided funding for programs based on their school-age childcare license capacity. So this required programs to be registered as a licensed school-age childcare program or register within a time frame if they were not already. With this requirement, school districts were not eligible to apply for the funding as it was only available to nonprofits. Applicants for LEAPs did not request a specific amount of funding based on a fixed per student funding rate like previously it had been the case. Instead, the Office of Children and Family Services allocated their funding based on the number of slots that they're licensed to serve in the program. This funding structure allowed LEAPs to provide funding levels focused on ensuring grantees have enough funding to create a truly high-quality program. However, due to limited funding availability, only 1/3 of eligible applicants of LEAPs were awarded grants, which speaks to the significant demand for after school in New York and a need for more investment in this program. The creation of LEAPs resulted in significant changes to the after-school landscape and presented new challenges and a lot of opportunities for advocates of after-school. It highlighted a demand for after-school and the woefully inadequate current investment, even with the increases that we saw last year. So with that, we're going to shift again. We're going to start talking about how us as the network, how we want the state to strengthen the after-school system in New York. So what are we looking at for next year's budget in order to strengthen after school, to push forward, to make it better in New York? So first, we want to review quickly with you all our Power 3 key messaging. So we want to highlight how we ground these conversations, how we frame these conversations, and how we talk about after school with elected officials as the network. So when we're making the case for after school, we really encourage advocates to center themselves back on the Power 3 key messaging to guide the conversation. We have 3 core talking points that help ground us and help kind of guide the conversation. So these are that after school keeps children and youth safe after the traditional school day ends, that after school supports academic achievement and development, and that after school helps caregivers balance work and family life. So these talking points aren't hard and fast rules. They're not things that you have to follow or something horrible is going to happen, but they do help ground everything that we talk about when we're talking to elected officials as touch points back and center it back on the people that benefit from the programs, namely the youth and families that are in our community. So really trying to center their needs, and these talking points are a way to try to keep yourself back on that space. So to accomplish the goals that we want to see in the coming years, the network takes feedback from the after-school field about the current concerns that they have to build our after-school budget priorities. So with all the changes related to LEAPs, our most prevalent ask focuses on increasing investments in after-school programs. So by increasing investments, we want to ensure that those who applied for LEAPs and were deemed high-quality programs, but were unable to receive funding due to limitation, are prioritized. This would help the state address the demand for after-school that we know exists, but remained unmet due to a lack of available funding for the grant. We're also asking the state to invest resources and funding into the after-school system to support middle and high school students that were left out of LEAPs grants. So as discussed earlier, the limited scope of LEAPs created a situation where there were many young people over the age of 12 that previously received after-school services that no longer do. So additional funding would help address this gap and restore supports to young people that were left out of LEAPs, specifically in that middle and high school age range. So the network is also asking the state to shore up investments in technical assistance for after-school providers. We know that specialized and tailored supports allows after-school providers to create and sustain conditions that will help programs maximize outcomes for youth. Additional support for technical assistance will give programs the opportunity to receive quality supports, professional development opportunities, and to strengthen the capacity of their programs. The network is also working with partners invested in supporting the childcare system at the state level and prioritizing additional funding for the workforce specifically. Many childcare advocates, including the Network for Youth Success, are asking the state to establish a permanent childcare workforce compensation fund. This fund would help after-school providers address persistent staffing challenges by increasing compensation for the childcare workforce, which includes after-school professionals working in school-age childcare programs. This is a long overdue investment in the workforce that we know is going to have major impacts on the well-being of families across the state. Finally, we know that school community partnerships are important and necessary for providing effective and efficient after-school programming. A collaborative approach between school districts and community-based organizations often results in the best overall outcomes for students. To help support collaboration, the network is proposing that agencies administering after-school grants create a unified policy and implementation framework to strengthen partnerships between both parties. So these budget priorities aim to address the current challenges that we see in the after-school field that they're facing, while trying to work to build structures that make the after-school system more efficient, effective, and responsive in New York State. Our recent draft of our after-school budget priorities can be found at the link that's going to be added to the chat. With new developments and information, these priorities may change, so we do update them as the budget season continues. We're flexible, make sure that they are as responsive as possible to what the needs currently are. So, to close out our session today, and then we'll be able to take some questions, we want to discuss the opportunities for you to be involved in after-school advocacy this state budget season. So we gave you all the what, and now it's the how. What's going on? Where are we at? And now we're going to do the how can you help? So the first things first, the big thing. On March 25th, 2025, the network is going to host the Power of Three After-School Day of Action at the Capitol in Albany. So this is an opportunity for supporters of after-school to come together. That includes youth, after-school professionals, and families to show the importance of after-school and impact of their programs. This event will include an after-school spotlight for young people to showcase their skills, an after-school expo for programs to display the types of activities they do in their program, and a self-guided activities at the Capitol as well. So we really encourage you to register to join us and bring families to the event. If you are in that position, you can bring young people, please feel free. We encourage it. Registration does close on February 14th, Valentine's Day, easy to remember. So if you choose to bring young people, we recommend registering as early as possible. This will give us the chance to kind of collaborate, work with you to make sure that we're building a really beneficial experience for those young people that are coming with us. And we will drop that. There it is. Allie dropped it right in the chat. She's on top of it. So we do have other opportunities throughout the year for organizations and supporters of after school to uplift after school to their elected officials and to advocate. This includes the We Love After School event in February, the After School for All Challenge, which is a federal advocacy event hosted by our national partners, which happens in spring, After School Professionals Appreciation Week in April, the National Summer Learning Week in July, and Lights on After School in October. A lot of these are awareness campaigns. So they're things that you can post on social media, you can push, you can tag your legislator, all these other pieces. So we also want to flag that our national partners are currently have an action alert live for after-school supporters to contact their legislators to tell them to support federally funded after-school and summer programming. It only takes a few minutes to complete. It's an easy way to get involved in federal advocacy efforts. It's a really simple tool. Allie's going to drop something in the chat in that as well, but really it's just sending like an email out to your legislator saying, please fund after school at the federal level. Like, we care about this. We also, as mentioned before, encourage you to sign up for our Power 3 listserv to receive weekly updates on after-school advocacy opportunities. So this webinar was pushed there. It also includes information about the advocacy opportunities that we mentioned before. And also, if you want to help inform what our policy priorities are for next year, this is where we put our survey for that. So we put it out in a lot of places, but this is the core place you're going to see it first. You can also check out other advocacy trainings. We have general trainings on a range of different topics related to after-school advocacy for free on our website. And we're going to be hosting another session like this on January 21st, which will be focused on the New York budget process. So Allie's going to drop that in the chat as well. We also invite you to explore regional networks that have a little more local focus. So if you're interested in joining a regional network, you can reach out to me and I can work on connecting you. We also welcome you to share highlights of your program. So this includes photos, testimonials, videos that we can use in advocacy efforts. So we're always looking for those kind of things to send to legislators to say, like, look at all the great work that folks are doing. Look at these kids having fun, all that stuff, right? So if you're interested in that, go ahead and send it my way. Allie's going to drop that stuff in the chat as well. So this slide just includes some resources for your reference that you can access once we share the slide deck. So I'm not going to talk too much about it, but just know that it's here for your resources and your reference. And with that, I'm going to thank you all first. So thank you for coming in and joining us today, taking this kind of quick, fast time right before the holiday season to get some information from us. And we are going to stay on for a little while to answer questions if anyone has any. So if you have any in the chat box, if you want to unmute, I'm open to that as well. But yes, first, thank you all for joining. Any questions? Thank you for saying thank you, Maria. I really appreciate it. Excited about the rally this year. We're excited to see you there. Western New York representing. Oh, thanks, Annie. And if you don't have questions, you can just say goodbye. You can head out if you want, stay out if you want, however it needs to be. No problem.
Yeah, I don't necessarily have a question, but I wonder if there's any folks that are still on that want to kind of talk about what the kind of like organizing within your organizations to participate in advocacy looks like, and if there's anything that we at the network, I'm the co-chair of the policy committee, can do to support whether your organization or in your region to ensure that we have representation from all parts of the state when we do our advocacy day in March.
I'm curious too, and Annie put it better than I could have, so if anyone wants to share, no pressure. If not, you can also reach out to us if you have thoughts. From Ohio. Oh, but you're a program manager from New York. I'm from Michigan, but I'm a policy advocate from working with New York. So hi, fellow Midwesterner.
Hi there.
Hi. I'm glad it was helpful though. I'm glad the kind of the lay of the land of what's going on. If you are curious also of more information like that, our other webinar series, if you just want to take a little bit of time to like those links that we dropped, there's some that are like Advocacy 101 that really just walk through like, this is what the after school field looks like. A little bit's outdated because LEAPs didn't exist yet when we did those ones, but it does have some really helpful information about that kind of broader perspective. And also the leadership in New York, again, could shift, but a lot of those folks have been around for a while. So probably going to be similar folks in those spaces. So if you want to check those out, those will have some information too if you're curious.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, of course. I'll give it a few more minutes, but if no one has questions, maybe till 1:35. And if no one has any questions by 1:35, I'll close this out. Or any response to what Andy had said, any kind of organizing or thoughts about bringing folks to advocacy events, what that might look like for y'all. or comments. Those are also fine too. I'm not gonna limit you, all right, if you want to share. And you know what we could probably do? We could probably stop the recording. So